There's something beautiful about the purity of running. Your successes are your own, your failures are your own. Running is so simple and it's so pure that you can learn a lot about yourself. Like if you succeed, that's you. You fail, that's you. As you age, it's you, and it's shown, right? And you're a soccer player and you age, you can kind of tell, right? But it's masked because there are 10 other people on the field. There's a ball, there's like another team you're playing against. You can't really tell how well you're playing. Running, you can tell, it's right there. Like how fast did you run your 5K?
And welcome back. We have Nick Thompson joining for another round on the podcast. Nick, thanks so much for taking some time out of your very busy schedule to talk about running.
Amazing. Jonathan, I love talking about running with you, so I am thrilled to be here.
I appreciate it. You have one of the more interesting careers at the intersection of running and media and business. You're a writer now. We're going to talk about that creative process. And I've just loved how you've interacted with running and running media over the years. I don't want to give away the farm on the intro. I want to ask, how do you define yourself? Who is Nick Thompson?
That's a good, complicated question. Completely stumped on question number one.
Caught off guard.
I'm the father of 3 boys, right? I love being the father. That is the most important thing to me. Being a good example, being a good father, being there for them, helping to help them find their passions and find the things they care about the most. They're getting older and they're, moving on. My oldest is 17. So that's a very important job. My day job is I'm CEO of The Atlantic, and my goal here is to, this was a magazine founded in 1857 by Ralph Waldo Emerson and others. My first goal when I got here was to make it profitable so we could hire more great writers. And we've done that. Things are going well. And now the next goal is to figure out what we do in an age where AI is going to turn the information economy upside down. And then my third role is I'm a writer and a runner. And I love running. I love running through the mountains. I love running races on the roads. And I've just written a book about how the sport can teach you about hard things in life, how it can help deepen your spiritual understanding of the world, and how it helped me understand my father. So those are the 3 parts of it.
I was just having a conversation with a friend, Luke Webster. He's an incredible photographer in the outdoor space, and he just ran.
Yeah, I know his work.
He's wonderful. In his summary of the marathon he just ran, I think he ran 2:35. He was talking about how this whole thing is so pointless and full of meaning at the same time. Actually, I don't think he added that second part. He's like, I'm lucky and grateful to have the privilege and finances to pursue this pointless endeavor. And I messaged him and I was like, this isn't pointless. Like, it enables us to, actually, I'm going to stop my sentence. Why does Nick think that running is not pointless?
Can I make the pointless argument first, just to help him a little bit? I can make the argument, not only is it pointless, it's actually like harmful, right? Because you run a race and you run 2:35. What have you done? You've basically made every person behind you one place worse, right? Like there's no value in the world. You probably maybe you made your spouse happy, maybe you made some friends happy, but pretty much you just made most of the people in the race a little bit more sad. It's kind of a selfish thing, right? You become totally self-indulgent. You're hard to talk to in the week before you run that 2:35 because you're so concerned about whether you get a cold and your resting heart rate and if you've carbo loaded. And it can create habits of mind that are, profoundly ungenerous. Now, on the other side, obviously, and I believe the other side much more strongly, it creates habits of minds that are really good, like the stoicism, the daily habits, the things you learn as you train to run a 2:35 or whatever you train to learn to run. The spiritual connection that being outside gives you rest of the world, the clarity that it can give your mind, the ability that you have after you go for a run to approach the rest of your life with sort of more intensity, more openness, more awareness. It can make you a much better person. The pacing, the endurance, all of those things that you have to learn to run a good marathon are really good in the rest of your life. And you can, you set an example both for yourself and for others about how to do difficult and challenging things that is useful for whatever you're going to do in life. So actually, Luke, it's totally great. You should enter another one. Keep going. The sport is amazing.
Luke Webster, I hope you're listening. I'm going to have to tell you to listen to this one because, yeah, I totally agree. I used to think that running was an entirely selfish endeavor, and it was this thing that I did in Boston, and it was a great way to stay fit and meet some people and this and that. And then as time has gone on, I've just watched or unpacked that intersection of running in life and running in entrepreneurship and running in business, and just understood how it makes everything so much better. And so it's, in fact, in my opinion, not a selfish endeavor, but it's the best way to show up for everybody else around you. Sure, you can go off the deep end and spend, 3 hours a day doing it, or like a 90-minute run and 30 minutes of pre and post movement. Like, we're not professional athletes. We can't really afford that time. And some might argue that we can't not afford that time, but that's a deeper conversation. But yeah, I love that. And particularly in the context of the book that you wrote and your use of running to unpack things in life. And you have a busy schedule. And I'm sure that having some structure in your day helps make that all possible. So the point of this podcast is really understanding what enables peak performers to do what they do. And that's within the context of left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, but also how do you even get out the door? And so whenever I get to chat with somebody who has a schedule like yours, I first want to understand, like, how do you do it? Like, logistically, how do you make time for the training and for the things that enable you to be the best version of yourself?
Well, one of the things I do is I multitask a lot.
He's actually running right now.
Yeah, I've got like a little, you can't tell, I've like got such good core control, and I'm in an altitude chamber.
And it's 97 degrees.
You should never multitask while you're doing something important, right? Like if you're in a meeting, you shouldn't be checking your email. And so actually learning to not multitask is really important because you get so much more out of it. You're actually taking notes, you remember more, all that, blah, blah, blah. But I multitask in the sense that a lot of my running is commuting, right? So this morning I ran to the office, right? In the evening, well, actually this evening I have an event, but tomorrow I'll like run to my kids' soccer practice, pick them up and take them home in an Uber, right? So a lot of it is like transportation that I would be doing otherwise. Sometimes when I'm running, I'm like listening to podcasts, right? Not when I'm out in the woods and I'm like out there, but there's different ways of like doing your job anyway. I've been known to do Zoom calls while running as well. I do sometimes go to the sauna. What am I doing in the sauna? I'm like reading Atlantic essays and stuff I have to read, right? And so you figure out ways, like I cross train, right? This morning I was like, I did a short bike workout and was like watching something I had to watch that I'd saved on the TV, right? So you're just like, you kind of combine things as best you can. And then you also try to set up your runs so that they don't detract from the things that matter more and in fact enhance the things that matter more. So the great thing about run commuting is that it like clears my mind. I get up early in the morning, I work, I like hang out with my kids, I take them to school, I run, I'm now reset. I work all day, I run home, I reset, I play with my kids, I work some more. And, I've built it into my life in a way that it enhances all of this other stuff. The other thing about running, and I think sometimes people on the outside don't get it, like there's this incredibly beautiful thing about running, which is that you like literally can't do it that much, right? Like if you run more than 100 miles a week, you get hurt. It happens to everybody. And cycling, you can do infinitely. Swimming, you can do infinitely. Like a lot of other sports, hobbies, pursuits, like to become an elite chess player, you have to train like 15 hours a day, right? To become an elite runner, you can't really run more than an hour and a half a day or you get hurt. So, kind of works out all right. It's definitely the sport. If you are like trying to become elite at some sport and you have a hard job, this is the one for you because practice is capped and no one can practice that much more than you.
I love that. Yeah. And also it's not a skill sport like a ball sport where you actually have to develop skills. With running, you just do it more and you get more efficient at doing it. And then you do strides and then you do workouts and then you get faster.
And there's like with tennis, like if you want to become like the best 50 plus tennis player in the world, someone out there is practicing 8 hours a day.
So neither of us have the luxury of practicing running 8 hours a day. But what was the motivation for you to get into running? How did running find you? And why are you still doing it many, many years later?
So it started when I was 5 or 6 and my father took me running. He was going through a midlife crisis. He was recognizing that he was gay. He was struggling with alcohol. He'd begun to run as a way to kind of put some of his demons at rest. And he took little Nick out on the roads in Brookline, Massachusetts. So I ran a bit then, and then I watched him run the 1982 New York Marathon after, before which he had already left my mother. So it was like one of the first moments in this new world that I was living in where my parents were split. I then, this part isn't in the book, which I only recently remembered. I joined the track team in 6th grade. And I wasn't very good. And I did this shot put, which is weird when you see me, and the sprints, as opposed to the mile. I don't know what was wrong with my coach. In 7th grade, I then decided to quit the track team and instead do theater. And so I did theater through 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. In 10th grade, I went to a different high school. And this is when I started to really run. That was when I got cut from the basketball team. I joined the track team and then realized I was good. I then ran through high school, was very good, won a bunch of races. Went to Stanford, which is a good place to be an amazing runner, not a good place to be a walk-on, walked on, and then left after freshman year.
Good place to run though.
Oh, it's amazing. It's gorgeous, right? You've got the foothills, you've got a Rostradero, but it's not, it's like the Stanford cross country team under Vin Lanana is not a good place to be a runner if you're of like high middling talent. And so that was it for me. The team did go and win national title though. And then I got it back into my 20s. I got better in my 30s and I got much better in my 40s. And I keep going. I love it. I love the spirituality, love it. I love feeling like I'm more at one with the world than I am most of the time. I spend most of my days in, an office in New York, in Manhattan. And, this weekend I was out running in the Catskills. It's just incredible. You really feel like you're in a different spiritual and mental state. I like challenges. I like the lessons it teaches me. I like the people I've met. And I don't know, for better or worse, I love setting goals, racing, and sometimes getting them and sometimes failing abysmally.
You've set some big goals. One of them was you were going to pace Des Linden for a 50K attempt, and then she got a little too fast for you, which is fun. But talk to me about the taking big swings and attempting to do things that nobody has done before or do it faster than other people have done. What drives you to set goals like that?
It's a really interesting challenge. It never occurred to me in my 30s and early 40s. I just ran marathons, right? And I just wanted to, I had sort of fun, kind of quirky goals. I wanted to run less than 2 hours plus my age in minutes, right? So when I was 43, I wanted to go under 2:43. And then I got so much faster and I ran a 2:29 when I was 44. And I realized, wow, I'm in a whole different category. So then COVID hit and there were no marathons to run. And it was just sort of like, you had to come up with goals. And so I, decided to pace Des. And then I realized that pacing Des would mean I could set the 50K American record, which I did. It was amazing. And then after that, I was like, gosh, pretty cool to take on. That was a Mike Wardian record. Mike Wardian's amazing, right? So, wow, let's try to find the next record. So then the next one I tried to get was Ted Corbett's 1970 record in the 50 mile, which is the record for men 45 and up. Because he said it when he was 50, but it's faster than the 45 to 49 record. And so I tried to run 5:35 for 50 miles. It just seemed like people have been trying to do this for 55 years. Ted Corbett, one of the greatest runners and people, one of the greatest New Yorkers. Let's see if I can match it. And turns out I couldn't, but I came pretty close and loved going for it.
I'm curious on the ultra scene in New York. I read a post on LinkedIn from David Callahan that you may have seen where he was talking about, they did some data analysis of runners in Manhattan. And it was something like 60,000 runners had run a trail race. And unlike the Bay Area, where all of the people that live in the city congregate and run trails together in Marin or in the South Bay, in Pacifica, like places like that, there doesn't seem to be that same culture of ultra running or trail running. What's your experience been in New York going beyond the marathon, where 50,000 people run the New York City Marathon? And people seem to be obsessed with the marathon majors. Are you an outlier in your running crew? Are your friends also running ultras? Talk to me more about, if you saw that post, some thoughts on that post.
I didn't see that post, but it doesn't surprise me. I sort of have self-selected. I have a couple friends in New York who also run ultras. But without question, this is a marathon city. This is a road race city. In my club, the Brooklyn Track Club, almost everybody's running marathons, half marathons, 10Ks, miles. You just aren't. It's pretty hard. You can drive, in San Francisco, you can get on your bike, you cross the bridge and you go run up Coyote Canyon or whatever it is, Coyote Ridge. It's amazing, right? It's right there. Here, you get on your bike, it's 4 times as long and you're in the Palisades, right? Which is anyone who's not been in either place, let's just say that one is substantially more beautiful than the other. Palisades are cool, but you're in some New Jersey rocks, right? There's nowhere to trail run. And I started trail running this race called the Escarpment Run, which is it's 3 hours north of the city. It's this amazing 18-mile run in the Catskills. It's great. It's not like running in, I don't know, Mount Whitney or whatever the equivalent distance, or running in Yosemite. And it's hard to train for. Here's how I would train for the Escarpment Run: by running on sidewalks and trying to stay on the edge of the sidewalk. I would try to jump over fire hydrants. And, it's hard to learn all the balance stuff and the stuff to become a good trail runner when you live here.
It makes sense. I'm just going back to, it was a post from 3 weeks ago that just popped up on my LinkedIn yesterday. But
also, congratulations on reading LinkedIn. I'm glad to know that there's another human out there besides me who uses LinkedIn as their principal form of social media.
I love
where
LinkedIn.
It's at.
I love
where it's
LinkedIn.
At.
It is where it's at. It's the one platform where people are still mostly real, and there's so much bullshit, but there's also if you're interested in the business of the outdoor industry, that's the place for you. And particularly David Callahan, he just has these questions that turn into like, there are like 60 comments on this post, 54 comments on this post.
Right. And everybody's tied to their professional identity. So they're not, they're real people and they're saying actual things that they think about.
Yeah. Anyway, it's fantastic. Cool. Yeah. I appreciate that thought there. And it's just an interesting exploration. Like, I've run a bunch of awesome trails in Bear Mountain and just north of the city. But to your point, like, you have to make a substantial effort to get there. And there's so many people that don't have cars or whatnot that rely on their feet and their bikes as the primary, and the subway as primary, forms of transportation.
I mean, and if you live in Colorado, like, you just go out your back door and you can like run for 100 miles through the mountains. Here, it's like an hour and a half to Bear Mountain, and Bear Mountain's fine.
Yeah, that's definitely a luxury that I've been privileged to have. I go out my front door and I'm on dirt in 12 minutes, and I can be in mountains in 20 and bigger mountains in 30 by car. And it's interesting. And back to Des, like, we've seen all these like gravel shoes coming out and road to trail. And I was like, do we really need this? And I was making some commentary on it, and she responded. She was like, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the majority of this country has better access to dirt roads versus trails. And so the opportunity for a gravel shoe versus a trail shoe is actually far superior. It's just like the perception is nobody's running gravel because we're seeing, cool trail races versus gravel.
That's a smart point. That's an interesting observation.
Yeah, and I'm sure Brooks has helped inform her of that, but she's also a very smart person and can come to these conclusions herself as well. And she probably runs on a lot of gravel.
The one good story I have about Brooks and Death Linden. So we run this race in Oregon, and she sets the world record. She goes off the side, pukes all over herself, but she set the world record in like 2:57. I come in at like 3:04. I set the American record for men. I'm super psyched. Josh Cox, her agent, is there. He like pulls the tape for me too, even though I'm an amateur. Anyway, so the rule is you're supposed to drink champagne out of your shoe when you set a record. It's a Brooks race. So they have Brooks branding all over it. But I had run in Nike shoes. And so that's his husband, Ryan, offered to let me drink champagne out of his running shoes that he had just worn to run the 50K. And I was like, Ryan, I like you, but I think I'm going to not drink champagne out of your shoes. So I drank out of my shoes, but I covered up the swoosh, to respect Brooks. So
that's incredible. Was it gross?
No, it's fine. In retrospect, I should have just drunk out of Ryan's shoes. Like, who cares, right? Like, you do it once. And
dirty
so
shoe is
like,
a dirty shoe. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know why my toe sweat is like necessarily like cleaner than his toe sweat. I don't know.
Well, which one of you ran it faster?
I think I ran it fast. Well, actually, I ran it faster, but only because he took a bunch of bathroom breaks, which probably means that my shoes might have been cleaner. Who knows?
Yeah, totally. And you weren't in the bathroom and you took less time. So there's less time for sweat.
There you go. Thanks for backing me up here.
Okay, so let's jump back over to the professional version of you. And you talked about creating content and storytelling and writing in this age of AI, when you could go into ChatGPT and say, hi, I'm Nick Thompson, write a book for me, right? And it could get fairly close. Like, how do you continue, and how is the Atlantic thinking about creating content and strong storytelling in this age where there's so much AI slop, and then there's like pretty decent AI content as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I started writing this book 5 years ago. So I wrote it. I was like, had already started drafting it when ChatGPT came out. And as I wrote it, the models improved a lot. I had a rule, and it was like a philosophical rule, that I would never use AI to write a sentence. And, my name's on the cover. People are buying Nick Thompson's book. I want to have written it. There's some like interesting legal questions at some point they'll get resolved. Like, if you use if I say, hey, ChatGPT, write a book, and then I sell $1 million worth of books, like, who should get the money? Should OpenAI or should I? Like, it's an interesting, like, at some point there will be a case. So there are like legal risks if you use AI to write your content. And then the other factor is that AI writing actually isn't that good, right? And you can make it better. And I had very long, sophisticated prompts I'd use for my AI tasks, but I was never able to get it to generate anything that I didn't think sucked for prose. Now, what I did use it for, I set up a custom GPT to coach me, right? And give me workouts and tell me what I should eat and help me figure out how to think about whatever pain I had in my ankle or hamstring. I then, as I said, I had these like very long prompts that talked about my writing style, and I would have it analyze different sections of the book, help me make sure chronology was perfect. I used it as like a thought partner. I used it to analyze interview transcripts. So I would interview people And then I would take what I'd written, I would upload the interview transcript, and I would say, is there anything that I've written that doesn't completely square with what they told me? Is there any quote they gave me that's better than what's in here? So I would use it as this infinitely energetic editor who sometimes BS's and you just have to be careful of, but who's on call 24/7. And I thought it was amazing. And so I, probably did 1,000 AI sessions while working on the book, but never to write even a word.
And in your role as CEO,
so the Atlantic, so the editorial side is separate from the business side. So I report to the board, the editor reports to the board. So I don't get to make decisions on how Edit uses AI. But, I see pretty similarly to the editor-in-chief. So they have a policy of not writing anything with AI. And then some of the writers use AI the way I use it, which is help me find story ideas, help me analyze this data set. Presumably some of them use it to help edit. Presumably some of them use it to help copy edit. But there's also a lot of skepticism and a lot of distrust of AI. And it's founded, based on one fear, which is that AI is going to obliterate all of our jobs in our industry. And then one kind of bit of anger, which is that AI, like the AI companies, built these infinitely valuable models by scraping and stealing our data without any compensation for the most part. And so it's an industry based on theft of creator content that could destroy the creator economy. And my view of that is, well, let's deal as best we can with the theft, right? Let's negotiate partnerships. Let's, file lawsuits. Let's figure out transactions. And then B, let's use the tool as best we can to keep going as long as possible. But there are many people in my profession who deal with the theft and the threat by just being screw AI.
Trust is the one asset or commodity that cannot be cheated or growth hacked or I've been doing this podcast for 6 years. People who have been listening since the beginning have potentially heard me for 400 hours.
How many people do you think have listened to every single one?
Probably 30, something like that. And if you are one of those people, I would love to hear from you. I actually know of a handful of them. They tell me constantly and I love them for it. But the point is what I love about the podcast medium, it is that long tail trust building exercise where, again, I'm not doing this specifically to build trust with the audience. I'm doing this because I think you're a fascinatingly interesting person and I want to find out what's going on in your brain. And then other people are interested in hearing that as well. Great. They can listen to our, kind of talk show engagement at this point. But there's been so much discussion around AI influencers, AI creators. You can create an ad fully based on AI that doesn't have any real people in it. And you're just I need a man that looks like this, that's interacting with a woman that looks like this, and they're going to do that. And you post that on Instagram and it converts sales. Or you have this long tail experience of you have someone in your ear for, dozens or hundreds of hours. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I just think that there are certain components that AI cannot, it can enhance, but it can't necessarily replace. And so I'm curious how you think about trust as it relates to your readers, as it relates to the way that you're engaging with your audience. And is that a conversation that you have with the team that hey, we've been here since before 1900. Ralph Waldo Emerson created this thing and it's on us to sustain the legacy of what he created. Do you think about it in that way? And is there any discussion internally as it relates to that?
Yeah. So the discussion of trust is incredibly important in our profession and in all professions, right? So we're entering this period, I call it the end of reality, where you will have no idea. We're getting to the point, right? You have no idea when you see a photograph if it's real or not. 2 years ago, you could kind of tell because there were 6 fingers. 6 months ago, you could kind of tell because the shadows were off, and now you have no clue, right? And so we'll have no idea whether an image is real, whether an advertisement is real. Eventually, we'll have no idea whether a podcast is real, because there'll be some people who have had a podcast for 6 years and they keep going and do it themselves. And there'll be some people who voice clone themselves and create synthetic podcasts. We're just going to enter this very weird world.
You could do that today, which is crazy. Yeah.
And I was just listening to a podcast by a friend of mine who it's part of the shtick, but he voice cloned himself and you can't tell. And as we enter that world, I do think that trust will have a real premium. And so I suspect that 2 years from now, you're going to have to do your podcast in live settings, right? So that humans can actually verify that you, Jonathan, are there interviewing the guest, right? Right now there's a video and there's me and you, but it could be faked, right? Like if we were to sit together, you couldn't fake it. I don't know whether you'll have to do that, but there'll be a premium on that. And people will want to go to that. The folks who've listened to all 400 hours will want to like see you for real in those spots. And a place like the Atlantic, in a way, will become more valuable because we have this trusted brand. We've been around since 1857, but we also have to hold on to it as tightly as possible, right? There are going to be lots of people making fake Atlantics, right? Like Dinesh D'Souza, very like well-known Republican commentator, hundreds of thousands of fans, constantly, like every 6 months, shares some fake Atlantic headline, right? And it's something to make us look bad or super woke. And like someone has created it and he shares it. There are going to be many, many more examples of this where people like trying to hurt you or trying to hurt me create synthetic versions that have Nick Thompson saying crazy stuff or has the Atlantic publishing crazy stuff. And so the fight between the real and the inauthentic is going to be harder and more important. And there's going to be like a premium on the places that have long reputations and can maintain trust and can maintain their veracity. So that's something we think about a lot at the Atlantic. And that's partly why we have this like hard line. Here's another thing that's going to happen. This is a crazy thing that's happening in journalism. Like, I don't know, I don't oversee the editorial side, but it happened at Wired. Like there are fake freelancers created by, AI studios or Macedonians, who knows, like that will send you a pitch saying, hey, I'd like to write about this. And it's a total AI fraud. And they're just trying to get the freelance check. And, God forbid anything ever gets through our fact checking, but we're going to have to be incredibly careful about that too. So, you've got all these different vectors of attack and all these different vectors of risk in the AI world, and you have to fight back and protect yourself.
What's your call to action for people listening who are a part of the audience and wanting to stay in that trust ecosystem, but don't necessarily know what to do or how to be helpful in doing that?
One of the most important things is to not reshare, not to pour gasoline on the fire. Like when you see something, like you have to be skeptical about it before you send it on. You have to think like a lot of the missing, like, oh my God, that doesn't sound like the Atlantic would say that. My God, well, I'm going to retweet it to like show them it's wrong. Well, actually pause and like maybe go to theatlantic.com and see if it's there, right? Like learn this is what, I use Dinesh D'Souza just because he's a prominent person. It's like, Dinesh, like go to the website and search, right? It's not there. Like you're smart enough to know how to do this. It takes 10 seconds. And so that's part of it. So to be a little bit skeptical, to be aware that we live in this world of unreality, to rely on, we actually increased our print circulation, right? We now do 12 issues a year instead of 10, in part because of this. Like, it's real. It gets delivered to you. It's printed on paper copies. It's delivered through the US Postal Service. There's no algorithmic intermediary. So sort of start shifting your information diet. So you're getting less from the places that are going to be more fraudulent and more from the places that are real. Like your group chats are more likely to be real than your social media threads, right? Like print material is more likely to be real than digital material. So kind of like shift your information diet to get more real stuff, be highly skeptical, and then verify. And then if you can be a node, I've kind of like been critical of Twitter, but the community notes is great, right? You can be a node that's in like community notes of Twitter or, in a verification part of one of these social media algorithms, which is where so much of this garbage spreads. You can also push back about it. Like a lot of people say, hey, you should never be on social media. My view is you should be on social media, putting out truthful, good information and countering bad information.
Okay, switching back to the running side of the conversation, one of the things that you can't fake is fitness and training and the like brick by brick component in this increasingly digital world. Do you think about the beauty that is like this simply can't be faked and you can't like hack or AI build your way to something wonderful with running?
Totally. It's like one of my favorite things about it, right? So I remember thinking when I set the American record in the 50K, like you become CEO of the Atlantic and you can like, people can say, he's only CEO because, I don't know, because he went to Stanford and like, the owner wanted someone from Stanford, or he's only CEO because he's like tall, heterosexual, or whatever it is, right? Like all these things like, who knows? And maybe I am CEO because I went to Stanford, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know why I was selected, but no one can say I didn't deserve that. I wasn't like the fastest person in this 50K. It's a weird race and a weird age group, right? So it's not that substantial. It's not like I set a world record, but like it's pure, right? It is you. Like there's nothing, you didn't get any special event. Like the wind wasn't at your back more than it was at everybody else in the race, right? Like you didn't have to run less than everybody else. So there's something beautiful about the purity of running. Your successes are your own, your failures are your own. It was part of the thesis of the book, which is that running is so simple and it's so pure that you can learn a lot about yourself. Like if you succeed, that's you. You fail, that's you. As you age, it's you, and it's shown, right? And you're a soccer player and you age, you can kind of tell, right? But it's masked because there are 10 other people on the field. There's a ball. There's like another team you're playing against. You can't really tell how well you're playing. Running, you can tell it's right there. Like how fast did you run your 5K? And so the purity and simplicity of running allows you to just gives you much more clarity. It means you can own your successes. You deserve your successes more than like anything else in life.
Can you talk about how you mentioned this was part of the thesis of the book? Like, how does that play into it?
So part of like the reason I wrote the book, there are a couple moments that inspired the book, but there are really two that matter. So one was, I ran, as I mentioned early on, I ran all of these 240 something. So I run a 243 marathon when I'm 30 years old. Right afterwards, I get diagnosed with cancer. It's like the week afterwards, and it's like ineluctably tied in, right? And, hardest thing in my life. I get through it. 2 years later, I run another 243. And then for like 12 straight years, I basically just run 243s, like over and over again. In my 40s, I run 229. I set this record. I'm like in a different category. And so I was thinking, like, why did this happen? Part of the reason I got so much faster is I had these nice coaches at Nike. They gave me these new workouts. I had these bouncy shoes. But I realized that the main reason I'd been able to get faster, or the main reason I hadn't run faster in my 30s, was that I had been psychologically blocked. Like I hadn't been able to conceive that I could go faster than I had been before I got sick. And like that insight was like, wow, right? So running, it's like, what makes you go fast, what makes you go slow is really like deep inside of you. And it's like part of your fears, your expectations, your hopes, your confidence, your lack of confidence. And again, that ties into how pure it is and like how much it reflects what's going on inside of you and your soul. And so that was the moment where I thought, this could be an interesting book. Because like the story of like Nick gets faster as runner, not that interesting. Story of like, how our deepest fears control how quickly we run, and then writing about other people and how this process affected them. Now that's an interesting book. And then the second moment was after my father died. I started to write a letter to my children about what he'd meant to me. And then in that process, like just couldn't stop writing. Wrote like 6,000, 7,000 words on the plane back from the Philippines where he had died, about his loss of discipline, how I try to maintain it, but also like the love he gave and the example he set. Those are the moments that sort of inspired me to write. And a lot of it, comes back to what I was just saying, that the clarity and singularity of running the simplicity opens up complexity.
I love what you said about the ability to break through the 243 to the 229. Like, again, that specific time improvement isn't what matters. It's the you did a thing and you unblocked something, and then you did a thing minus a certain number of minutes. And I'm sure you've taken that process to other places in life. And to me, that's the value of all of it. How did you go about unblocking the hurdles or the barriers that were in your way of getting faster than the 243?
I think it was, my coach at the time, Steve Finley. I think he kind of when we first talked and when he first started thinking about whether he was going to coach me, he asked me about my goals. He sensed very early on that I had the ability to go much faster than I had been going, and that I was afraid of going faster, and that I sort of had decided it was impossible to run a marathon at faster than 6 minutes per mile. And so he then, once he started coaching me, was like, okay, well, let's see if we can get Nick to not be afraid of going faster than 6 minutes a mile. And so part of what he would have me do is run 200-meter repeats and look at your watch. So you're seeing you're running 440. Then it makes the 540 of your 4-mile repeats less scary. And all right, let's really get Nick, let's get him to feel comfortable at 5:30 pace for 5 miles, right? Let's do that kind of work until eventually, then it's okay, now let's see if we can do 10 miles at faster than 6, right? And let's get it so you're not afraid of 6 minutes per mile for a marathon. And it wasn't as though he just was hey, Nick, you can run, faster than 238. You can just go do it. He had to gradually kind of break down all those fears for me.
I remember hearing you talk about this on another podcast. I can't remember which one it was, but it's just, maybe it was Zach Bitter's podcast. And it's such an oversimplification, which I think makes it so powerful, right? If you want to do something hard, do something harder so that something hard isn't as hard. And I reflected on what you guys were talking about after that episode, and I was like, this is what I love. One of the things I love most about running, right? On that day, I had run a 10-mile run or an 8-mile run as my regular Tuesday run. And in a prior version of my running, that's a long run. And that's a big effort. And I ran 8 miles today in 12 degrees, and it was not a big deal. Again, like 5-10 years ago, that's a super big deal. And I ran 50 miles last week. That's like not a lot of miles for me in training. But 10 years ago, that's like, wow, I'm going to give everything I've got. I'm going to push as hard as I can every single day, and I'm going to run 50 miles in a week. And like I've run 80 plus. And to me, that's the like peak of what I can do. And if I'm pushing really hard, a few weeks ago, I stacked as many miles as I could into a 3-day period. I ran Tuesday, I ran 12 and 3. On Wednesday, I ran 13 and 2. And on Thursday, I ran 10. So I ran 39, whatever the math is, I ran 39 miles in 3 days. And I was like, holy shit, that was really hard. And that was like, that used to be like a big week of training for me that I just did in 3 days across 5 runs. And it's just this like perfect epitome of stress, rest, repeat. Stress, rest, repeat. The stress then becomes bigger, the rest becomes more effective, and the repeat becomes everything you've done plus one, everything you've done plus one, and you just level up. And to me, once you can have that realization that this is what running does, both mentally and physically, you can do anything if you set the right goals.
You've said that so well. And, I think probably what I was talking about with Zach was this great moment. It was before the 50K race, and I called Brett Kirby. Yeah, I had never run a 50K, and I was terrified. And I don't know, I was like, my heart going to fail? Like, just the fears you have. And I called Brett, and he was like, Brett works for Nike. He was like, Nick, just think of something you've done that's harder. And then I was like, oh, okay, actually, there have been a bunch of things I've done that are harder. Like I've actually run for more time. I've done 4-hour runs like in the mountains. I've run faster. I've run marathons faster. And then I just sort of drifted off to sleep. And I think the larger point is exactly what you're saying, which is like your body has a thermostat, right? And at some point it's going to click on and like start making you afraid, right? And as you train and as you do new things, the thermostat kind of gets pushed back, and it doesn't go on at 50, doesn't go on at 60, doesn't go on at 70, doesn't go on at 80, right? And like now I'm no longer afraid of like 100 Ks in the mountains. I'm no longer afraid of running 13 hours. I am afraid of running 100 miles. I am afraid, as they say, of like a run where you see the sunrise twice, right? And I've never done that. Totally. Like I should do that. And then it also like gives you this other example of, right, okay, we've got really hard 4-hour thing you got to do at work. 4 hours. Got to stay concentrated for 4 hours. That's not a problem. I can stay concentrated for 13 hours. I did have a hilarious thought once. I remember I ran this 50-mile race and took, a little bit under 6 hours. The whole time I felt good. Like my mind didn't wander. And then I was like flying back across the country, which is 5 hours. Like, this fight is annoying. Like, I was like, wait, what's wrong with me? Right? Like,
I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But truly, that is what I love about it. I was struggling with motivation last fall, and my coach, David Roche, told me, put something on the calendar for 2025 that scares you. The scarier, the better. And so I picked Black Canyon 50K, which is a very runnable 50K. And I've done mountain 50Ks where it's okay to hike. But at Black Canyon, it was like, you could run the whole thing. You should be able to run the whole thing, like at my fitness level. And I ran the whole thing until my quads fell apart.
How far did you run and how far did you get?
19 miles.
That's legit. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I finished and I PR'd the 50K by a bunch and had a hell of a time, and it set me up for a really strong year. But the point was, I got into this motto or mindset of motivation follows action. And so I was taking action to basically push that envelope of, well, this is no longer comfortable for me, which means I should be doing it. Or like I didn't want to get out the door, which meant I should get out the door. And just the more you flex that muscle and train that muscle, the easier it gets. And to your point, like told this story on the podcast before, but I had a tough conversation at work that I knew I was going to have a couple of years ago. And I was run commuting from Brookline into Kendall Square. And I was 3 miles into my run. And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do an all-out mile right now. And so my 4th mile was an all-out mile. And it was, I was not sharpened for a mile, but I knew it would be somewhere around 5 minutes. And nothing else that I did that day would be nearly as hard as, putting my hand on the stove for between 5 and 5.5 minutes. And I was right. And I walked into that room for that meeting, literally thinking about that thing that I did in the morning, and I'm ready for anything that comes from the next, 30 minutes. And so to me, that's the whole point. Like, use this thing that we get to do, we have the privilege of doing, and it's best when used when it's about more than just running.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story and a great thing to do. That's so cool.
Nick, this has been a blast. We'll have to do an in-person podcast at some point. We got to get you out to Boulder.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure so everybody knows that we're real.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have to prove it. We got to get you out to Boulder, do some mountain running out here. In the meantime, where can people find you? Where can they find your book and any other calls to action for the audience?
Book is The Running Ground. You can buy it online on Amazon, all kinds of places. Please do buy it, gift it. It's a very good gift for spouses who don't understand why you run all the time. Right. And that's like a lot of the good feedback I've gotten has been people being like, now I understand what my partner's doing. Like they're not running away from me. They're not wasting time. They're in it for these deeply spiritual reasons. So please do buy it. Please do share. Please do mention it in your Instagram stories, your LinkedIn posts. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, LinkedIn, Facebook, NX Thompson, Nicholas Thompson. And thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you out there and happy holidays.
Awesome. I'll see you mountain running in Boulder.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Jonathan.